It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That, of course, Alan Saunders. And Alan, we got a guest on today's podcast. We couldn't come back from a long 4th of July weekend, just the two of us. We had to bring in some reinforcements. Chris Halicke of DKPittsburghSports.com joining the pod. Chris, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Did you guys have a good holiday weekend?
We did. I said it was a long weekend, but we put out an episode that we had put out on the 4th. So still, it was just a normal week for the Steelers Afternoon Drive crew. But yeah, I had a cookout that I hosted for the first time on the 4th with the fam. Had a bonfire that night. Went to a friend's cookout on the 5th. So great vibes over here. What about you, Alan?
Still got all 10 fingers. So it's been a successful 4th of July. That's the barometer. Yeah, good times.
Chris, being that you spent so much time, you call you Tex, spent so much time in Texas, I feel like you have a pretty high bar when it comes to barbecue. And I saw a lot of people having this debate between a cookout and a barbecue and the differentiation that needs to take place between them. What was your July 4th like? Was it a cookout? Was it a barbecue? Should there be the differentiation between
There's definitely a differentiation because barbecue is barbecue food, like brisket and ribs and
all right. So
sausage.
surprisingly, in your opinion, Andrew Filipponi got one right here.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it's barbecue and cookout. They're two different things. It's just
so what did your July 4th look like though?
Cookout. Just always cookout. We had hot dogs, chicken. Yeah, it was just a typical cookout. I didn't really do barbecue. I had barbecue while I was in Texas. So
I had a barbecue then at my house, but I went to a cookout.
There you go.
I smoked ribs.
Yeah, you had a barbecue.
So yeah, there we go. All right,
I made a flank steak on the grill. I'm not quite sure where that fits. That's almost like it's right in the middle there, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. I put that more on the cookout side. Maybe there are like certain meats. I'm not saying you have to like smoke a meat in order for it to be a barbecue, but I think that's a pretty good, like, did you smoke a brisket? Did you grill sausage or did you smoke sausage? Like
slow cooking to me is the essence of it being a barbecue.
That's true.
I obviously did not slow cook a flank steak. So.
No.
There we go. Nearly 3 minutes into this thing, haven't talked about football yet, and still aren't, because Chris, we got one more question for you before we move on. I asked everybody that comes on here, how do you feel about the intro music, the bus coming across, the logo of the show, all that stuff? We need to know your thoughts on the intro.
It looks cool, man. Looks good. I'm way better than I could do. So no, it looks good.
Way better than we could.
Yeah, that should also be noted. Yeah. Yeah. It's not like we did it, so
right.
Yeah. Shout out to all the people that have made this happen. The intro, best part of the podcast, we always say. But guys, the fallout of the Jalen Ramsey Fitzpatrick trade, we're not done with it quite yet. Alan mentioned on his morning rush, we'll get there eventually, and we'll stop talking about this. But 1 week into this thing, we are still talking about it. Some. I don't want to say narratives being pushed from the Miami side of things with this Jalen Ramsey thing, but Alan, you mentioned right at the top of this thing, there was something put out from the Miami Centennial about Jalen Ramsey and just maybe why the team was looking to move on from him as opposed to just Jalen Ramsey looking for a way out.
Yeah, I think it's been kind of an interesting thing throughout this entire process, and I've mentioned it before, that like the entire offseason, it was just like, yeah, the Dolphins are going to trade Jalen Ramsey. And nobody ever said why, which I always thought was very curious. Like he wants out and they're going to be like, all right, fine, we'll make it happen. So some reporting in the Florida Sun Sentinel today, which wasn't really reporting. It was from a columnist. So I don't know. It's not really reporting. It's kind of blurring the lines a little bit. Basically, Jalen Ramsey was late for a whole bunch of meetings and acted like a diva, and that's why the Dolphins want to get rid of him, which, I guess in some ways explains the trade and explains why they were so okay with trading him from the beginning. On the other hand, I don't know. I'm a little – not that I'm super skeptical of Jalen Ramsey potentially being a diva, because I think he has bona fides in that area that go beyond this, but I don't know. Tex, what do you make of this? And we'll get into more about when this happens, because I think that's the more interesting part of this story today.
Well, my initial question to that is, was this just something that happened last year? Because didn't they just sign him to a contract extension last year? Like,
correct.
I mean, it just seems like if that's like a typical thing for a player, then like normally that would be something that they've been dealing with for a while, not something that just popped up last year. So I mean, I don't know. The Dolphins were a mess last year, so maybe it is something, but also it does seem like the timing of this stuff does kind of leave in some questions to me, like, okay, why is this coming out now and not before he was traded? Because it's not like it was he requested a trade and then the next day the Dolphins traded him. Like, it was, okay, yeah, we're going to be willing to trade you. And then weeks went by. Why wasn't this stuff written about before he was traded? Because I can at least say from my side of things, whenever there was the whole talk about George Pickens possibly being traded or not, I had already reported that there were players literally pulling me aside to tell me about things that he was doing in the locker room that was pissing them off. So you put that stuff out there, that's just, what you do, you report it. And so you don't pick and choose when you want to report it. So it is a little interesting that it came out now, but I also think it's really hard to field a 53-man roster and have have at least one guy who would be like classified as like a diva type. It's also really, really difficult to do nowadays.
I think the thing that stands out to me, and I think you nailed it with the what happened, what changed. Well, in 2023, the Dolphins were good. They had 11 wins. They went to the playoffs. Last year, the team just fell apart. It was miserable. They're playing through mediocrity after starting 2-6. Like, I think that's one of the things that gets under talked about when it comes to Mike Tomlin always being 500 and the Steelers always being competitive, is that like bad football breeds other bad stuff. And that's the stuff that happens when you start 2-6, is that, you get 2-6. It's like, I don't need to come to practice on time. Like, this season's toast anyway. I'm 30 years old. I'm multiple time All-Pro, multiple time Pro Bowler, probably going to the Hall of Fame. Like, yeah, do I really need to be here for us to play the Patriots in week 12? Like, and that stuff never happens to the Steelers, but definitely happens in other places. It's one of those things that isn't always transferable. Like you said, it doesn't seem like Miami had any issues with Ramsey in 2023. And just because they had issues with Ramsey last year doesn't mean their Steelers are going to have issues with Ramsey this year.
Yeah. One thing that you just put in my mind there, Alan, and we can touch on this maybe further down, but I just wanted to put this out there, is everybody, that has this opinion, not everybody in the fan base, but everybody that has the opinion of the Steelers just wanting them to be bad this year, to be able to have a higher draft pick. These are the things you're talking about that are associated with that. Like, if it was really just last year where Jalen Ramsey is completely checked out of Miami because of how the year went, Pittsburgh has a year like that this year, who knows how many guys fall into that same bucket. Like, it's not just the record that gets impacted by this. There are so many things that have to go wrong and will go wrong for the team to fall into that of having that high draft pick that everybody covets so much.
But like, how many guys fell into that trap, when the Steelers started off 2-6 in 2022?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, like that's like legitimate question. Like, maybe Chase Claypool, maybe because he was traded, but
yeah, and that could have happened if they were 2-6 or 6-2. To be honest with you, just knowing Chase.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, fair point to bring up, sure, and I think that's why the culture being in place is certainly a big part of that. But yeah, either way, it's really interesting, because if this stuff was going on prior to 2024, then man, does it look like really bad that they gave him the extension even. So either way, regardless of which side you want to look at, but we've talked about this too. It's not just the Jalen Ramsey thing. You look at how the Miami of order of operations have gone down there. Like, let's talk about, like, Tyreek Hill could be thrown into this too. They gave him a new contract right around the same time as Jalen Ramsey, and it seemed for a period of time, and who knows what's going to go on now, that he was going to be on the outs as well, looking to get out. So they gave two guys contract extensions that we weren't even sure would see a second year of those. And it just seems like, what in the world is going on down there from a culture standpoint and a business perspective?
It seems like it's a big, gigantic mess. And I don't think that whenever the Steelers acquire these type of players. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that the Steelers are void of having these type of players. They just traded one away in George Pickens, but it does seem like the Steelers do a better job of at least like sidestepping the landmines throughout whenever they do have these type of players, or they do a better job of reining these players in when there are certain circumstances they have to. I mean, you never bat 1,000. There are always players that always end up being the exception to that. And there have been players that have been problems. Obviously, Deontay obviously was a problem for a bit, and George became a problem last year. But Mike Tomlin, overall, the way he's handled, I mean, again, I don't think anybody's going to argue that the job he did with keeping Antonio Brown under wraps for as long as he did, like his batting average is pretty good when it comes to dealing with players that can be difficult, especially in trying times.
Yeah, I mean, look at AB before and after leaving Pittsburgh. Certainly not any kind of clean track record in Pittsburgh, but it got a lot worse. Deontay Johnson had his moments in Pittsburgh and then can't even stay on a roster the whole next season. I trust Mike Tomlin more than most when it comes to dealing with personalities, and I think he's especially good at handling the personalities of veteran star players. I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen so many guys around the league late in their career be like, yes, that's the guy I want to play for. Now, Ramsey gets traded here, but Slay decides, yes, that's the guy I want to play for. Patrick Peterson talked over and over again about how I always wanted to play for Mike Tomlin. Aaron Rodgers talked about, I want to play for Mike Tomlin. If you're a coach that can't handle this stuff, that word gets around. And guys that are veterans aren't going to want to deal with it as they go through some of the final years of their career. And so you would not see these kind of veteran players being like, yes, I want to play for the Steelers, if it had been some kind of problem where those guys are thinking Mike Tomlin was a bigger part of the problem than he was the solution.
No, yeah, 100%. I mean, like Mike Tomlin, again, he over the years, again, there are going to be players that are the exception to that. But again, the majority of the players that he has handled, the way he handles them, the way that they've been able to navigate rough starts, back when they started 0-4 in the 2013 season, ended up finishing 8-8 that year. When they started 2-6 in 2022, ended up finishing 9-8. There are just all kinds of ways that Mike Tomlin has proved his ability to not just keep players focused and keep players engaged when times are tough, but also to keep the team as a unit, all continuing to go towards one goal. And that's not easy to do. And it's not like that 2022 team, probably the most recent version, was void of players that were difficult to deal with. Obviously there were fights in locker rooms and stuff like that during that season. So, he still does a really good job of that, and veteran players still want to play here.
This can be hard to predict. Things should go great in one place and then turn sour in another, and vice versa. Who knows before Jalen Ramsey gets here how it's going to go? But I was going to ask, just based off, this column that was put out, maybe what we've seen from Jalen Ramsey in the past, if you feel like there should be a level of concern in terms of how this marriage is going to go.
I always have to have a little bit of concern, when a team is willing to trade a player that early into a new contract. You got to kind of wonder why. It's the same thing that people might have questioned last year when the Steelers signed Russell Wilson, and you had the Broncos who were pretty much just trying to, they were just willing to cut the cord immediately and eat all that money just to be like, we don't want him here anymore. You have to ask why. So yeah, you can look at that and ask why. So yeah, there can always be a level of concern. And I think there should be a level of concern, but let's see how it plays, and then, see how it plays out. But again, though, if there's any coach that's equipped to handle that type of a situation, it's definitely Mike Tomlin.
Alan, anything to add to that?
Just, I think, the one area that, like Jalen Ramsey, who, by the way, Tex, you pointed out, was a team captain for the Dolphins last year. So yeah, they were real sour on this guy a long time ago. But like, even if you don't expect Ramsey to be a big leader in the way that Minkah Fitzpatrick maybe was, and if that's something that concerns you about the swap, I think when you look at Darius Slay and the way he mentored those two young corners in Philadelphia last year, like, I think they're more than okay in the leadership department in the secondary even if Ramsey is just a pro and not some rah-rah guy.
Well, and Ramsey's also a really high IQ guy. I'm not saying that he's Minkah Fitzpatrick when it comes to like football IQ and stuff like that, but Ramsey's also like really, really football smart. And so I don't think you're losing much of that in swapping Ramsey for Minkah or Minkah for Ramsey. But, you know, like you mentioned, Slay absolutely has shown and proven not just the ability to be a leader, but a willingness to be a leader. And I'm not saying Joey Porter is about to become this leader type. He's still kind of he's obviously still on the younger side, but I could absolutely see him wanting to eventually become more and more and more of that. And so who knows, maybe he takes a step forward in that department this year as well, with what he can do on the football field.
And I don't know that he's a big leader, but Thornhill's won 2 Super Bowls too. And that comes with, you know, all kinds of practical, been there, done that experience that he brings to the table.
Oh, and Deshaun Elliott's not going to be afraid to have his voice heard either. So,
yeah, everybody who needs to hear Deshaun Elliott hears Deshaun Elliott. That's for sure.
One of the other names he brought up there was Darius Slay, and I think that's an interesting pivot point. It was put out by Adam Kaplan that there's some concern about a knee issue with Darius Slay. First time this has been brought up recently. I know, like, I think the last thing that involving his knee, he had an arthroscopic procedure back in 23, where he missed some time, but then came back to play. And then we saw how he played as well as he did in 2024. I understand there's like just an inherited level of concern that has to be there when you're talking about a 34-year-old corner, but this just seems like, I don't know, out of nowhere, if you will, and there's not really much to it that he hasn't already proven like he's healthy from. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what to make of this.
I honestly don't know what to make of it either. I mean, he was still really good last year, and we didn't see really any limitations during OTAs or minicamp. So I'm this one's we have to see once training camp gets here, but I that's like of no concern to me or little concern to me. There's been nothing. Again, you know, you talk about age. Yeah, he's 34, but it's not like his performance last year like took a gigantic.
Nope.
No, I mean, he was still a really, really good coverage corner. Just because he didn't have the interceptions to go with it didn't mean that he wasn't good at his job. I mean, so I think it's really nothing much to be worried about.
The one thing I think it does for me kind of reinforce is that, like, of the ways the Steelers can sort of solve the problem of having 3 guys who primarily played outside cornerback last year, I don't think Slay moving to the slot sounds like one that is a winning combination. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he could certainly pull off the coverage aspect of it, but do you really want a 34-year-old with a history of knee injury fairly recent, like going and tackling Derrick Henry 10 times a game like that? That to me is probably not the way you want to go anyway, but this does sort of kind of reinforce that for me.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have Jalen Ramsey, who has experience of playing in the slot and like recently too, like with like last year, and definitely did it with the Rams, could be used as a blitzer. Like, why not use that? You know, let Slay do his thing on the outside, and then, you know, when you want to have all 3 guys, have Ramsey be the guy who primarily goes to the inside, whether it be slot or safety.
We've talked about, you know, how it's not necessarily a lack of creativity because of a desire to do so. It's just the personnel that they've had there. When you have a guy like Jalen Ramsey that you can play in the nickel, I wanted to bring this up, but it kind of, with what Chris just said there, kind of reminded me to do so. Do you think we'll get back to seeing them send guys from the nickel? Like, you know, going back to like the days of Mike Hilton, we would see them send a blitzer from there. Jalen Ramsey had 12 pressures last year. Just wonder if we could see more of that this year with having that type of player to do that job.
I think you could. I mean, I don't see why you. I think with the personnel that they have this year, you should see more man coverage. First off, I mean, you got Joey Porter Jr., you got Darius Slay, you got Jalen Ramsey, all guys who can man cover. But you should be able to also blitz more because of that. Because you should. I mean, I remember like pulling up some of the numbers, and like Mike Tomlin just did not trust his defense last year in man coverage on 3rd down. Just almost wouldn't do it. That's something that they can do more, and that in turn will allow them to be able to blitz more often, even if they're rushing only 5 guys and not having to do this, you know, exotic Dick LeBeau's zone blitz or anything like that. They could just bring an extra guy, and that can make all the difference because they can now trust the guys who are going to be back in coverage a little bit more. So yeah, I think you're going to be able to not just be able to blitz Ramsey from the nickel, but just be able to blitz in general more often because you have guys who can hold things down in man coverage.
Jalen Ramsey is a really, really underappreciated pass rusher. Like he's like almost like Mike Hilton level good at it. I'm interested to see what ways they'll be able to use that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more intriguing things to me that when I was looking at the numbers, even just last year, how they were sending him from the slot on blitzes. I was like, I'm curious to see if we get back to seeing more of that in Pittsburgh. A couple questions that we want to get to from some listeners here. First one here from Lando, my guy Dinkelberg. Appreciate, we see a lot of bird accounts. I really appreciate the Dinkelberg one as a Nickelodeon kid. Didn't go to Latrobe when TJ was holding out for his contract in 21. What was the vibe like then? Do you think the fan base will react differently with him this time around?
I don't know how the fan base is going to react to it if TJ's there and holding in, but I know one person who is not going to be concerned whatsoever. And that's going to be Mike Tomlin. He's not going to be concerned whatsoever if TJ Watt is standing on the sideline holding a helmet the entire time because he knows he's going to have TJ healthy for the start of the season.
Yeah, I don't think there was any reaction to TJ at all. As for like actual, I think the fan base has gotten very angry over the last few years, and I don't really. I mean, they all attacked Cam Hayward of all people last offseason. So now, not in person, but I don't know. I think that's a thing that happens online more than it happens when people are in the stands.
As with anything, I feel like the internet is a completely different place. Social media gives a lot of people a voice that they do not have in person and are willing to say a lot more with their fingers than they are with their mouths. So yeah, 100% agree on that. I didn't go to training camp at all in 21. So like, I don't have any type of, knowledge on how it went then, but I do feel like from a social media perspective that I don't recall it being the same vibe around. Cause I think everybody just like at that time was like, doesn't even matter. Get that done. Pay them. Now there's people that are bringing obviously, 3 seasons in a row with some injury concerns and performance getting up there in age, not necessarily real life. Like people don't look at the percentage of the cap. They just see that raw number of $40 million and that scares them away. So I think that there's just a lot of factors there where the vibe is just different from the fan base online.
You brought up the percentage of the cap. Like if they give him the same contract they gave him last time, and it's the same percentage of the cap, it'll be like almost $43 million a year. Like, come on, like it's basic NFL mathematics. It's just it's a really easy. I don't think the AAV is even the sticking point either. I think it's more guaranteed money, but. Yeah, I do think it's more. I think it's more of an internet issue than it is an actual overall fan base issue when it comes to Watt.
Yeah. Curious to see how that plays out and what it looks like at training camp and if TJ is there holding in. The other one, completely switching sides of the ball here from Patrick Link, who's been asking a lot of good questions recently for the show. Here's a question. Steelers offense scored 17.9 points per game in 2023. That jumped to 22.4 in 2024. A lot of personnel changes in 2025. So what are we predicting from a points per game standpoint as we sit here right now?
Overall, yeah, like I have to give a number.
Hey, listen, Patrick's putting us on the spot, so I guess so.
I know. I'll go. I don't know that I'm going to pick a number of points per game, but I'll say this: like they finished 16th last year in total points at 380, and that was a big jump. In fact, it was the biggest jump from 23 to 24 of any team that changed their offensive coordinator last year. I think it gets much harder to move up, though, as you start to move up. I think they can get to about 12, though, and 12 last year was the Arizona Cardinals, who had 400 points. So I'll just say I think they're going to score 400 points this year.
Yeah, I think there should be an increase. I mean, the quarterback play should be better and a better fit for what Arthur Smith wants to do. The receiver room, despite any internet hysteria, is better than it was last year. The running back situation, yeah, you could be a little concerned and being like, okay, well, Caleb Johnson, is excited as you could be about him, he still has yet to take an NFL snap. But again, it should be a better fit for what Arthur Smith wants to do. So as long as the offensive line takes a step forward with their development together, they should be scoring more points, and they have to get better in the red zone. So yeah, I would think they're going to be better. So yeah, I don't know about putting a number on it, but possibly getting to 24, 25 points a game. Yeah, that should be what they're aiming to do. They should be aiming to be much better than they were last year.
All right. These guys are both cowards. 23.5 points per game for the Steelers offense in 2025.
That's exactly 400 points. What do you mean? That's exactly 400 points.
Okay, yeah, you did give a total there. I didn't do the points per game. You did the total. Fair enough. But all right.
It's exactly the same. I think one of the unanswered questions about the Steelers this offseason that we have to look forward to in training camp, though, is what their answers are in short yardage. You had a lot of running with Justin Fields and a lot of Najee Harris in that area last year that are not options this year. And I'm very curious to see how that goes as we get into training camp, because they weren't very good in the red zone overall, even though they were pretty good at and one. So if you get worse at and one, then what happens?
Yeah. Well, if Arthur Smith checks his email, he will see that I have suggested a Darnell Washington tush push taking place in 2025.
I mean, shoot, man, good luck stopping that. What the Ravens do it with Mark Andrews, so I don't understand why you couldn't do it with Darnell.
Well, hey, Arizona, who we brought up is an offense that we're trying to achieve in terms of points per game this year. They do it with Trey McBride. Yeah. He has some rushing attempts under his belt there. Cincinnati was doing it with like Tanner Hudson, I think, was their guy, their tight end in that spot as well. So, yeah, I mean, and we got a big guy to do it. So there's my suggestion.
Bring back Zach Gentry, uses his history as a quarterback to be able to get under center, and then you could just you're only on the roster to do the tush push. That's it.
That's absolutely what we need, is another tight end on the roster.
Yeah, right.
That's the fan reception to that will be about as well as it's been for TJ Watt when TJ Watt gets over $40 million per season. All right, Chris, before we get out of here, as we always do. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead, somebody. Go for it.
Well, I was gonna close it out. So you got something else you want to say?
Oh no, we got to talk about. We got to go with the. So Chris, we got a question when Carter was co-hosting with me when Smitty was on vacation. Was if Carter and I had a beef, what would it be over? And it was so good that I've just reused the question for all the guests we've had this summer. If you and I are beefing, Tex, what are we having a beef over and why?
Oh man, I got to go back to some nights at the bar at the combine, because there have definitely been some things. I know you're not a Linkin Park fan. Like I know
I'm not. Like I think music is the right answer here.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure I'm on the winning side of those arguments, given your significantly greater musical accomplishments than mine. So I think that's probably it, and I'm also probably wrong, but that's never stopped me before.
See, but that's the great thing about music, is that it's so subjective that like what's really right and what's really wrong. I mean, I have my taste in music, which is pretty wide. I like a lot of genres of music, but yeah, I do think I'm right more often than you are when it comes to music. So I will say that.
Amazing. Before we get out of here, though, Chris, can we get a TLDR version every time that we have a guest on here of basically like how you got to the point that you are right now? I see the Terrible Towel in the background. I see the Texas Rangers thing in the background, two teams that you've either covered before or are currently covering. What has the journey been like to get to the point where you are now, and what were the bumps along the road?
Yeah, so it was man. I got a 2-year degree in college back in 2014. I went to college late because I decided to try to make music whenever I was getting out of high school, and that did not go anywhere. But no, I went to college, got a 2-year degree, and then just started freelancing like crazy. Just started, doing whatever I could to get my name, to get my byline out there. And eventually, like 5 years later, I signed on with the Sports Illustrated network to cover the Texas Rangers because I was living in the Dallas area. They were hiring MLB writers, and so I was hired to cover the Rangers. I did that for 3. I was in my 3rd season whenever I took a job to start covering the Steelers and Pirates for DK Pittsburgh Sports. And then after I made the move up, Dale Lawley went on to work for Steelers.com, and I switched over and just started doing the Steelers beat like full time after that. So that's pretty much been my journey. So not the traditional route to become a sports journalist, but if you grind hard enough and prove you can do the job, I guess you can do it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I don't know if you have a follow up to that, but I mean, that was pretty good for a TLDR. You crammed with them.
That was solid. And I also had a fairly unconventional path here, so I just enjoy that part of it. That you don't have to go to Northwestern or Syracuse to end up in one of these seats. I think it's something that people should hear.
There we go. Well, Chris, before we jump out of here, of course, tell the listeners or viewers of this podcast where they can find you and get more of your work.
Well, all of my work is on dkpittsburghsports.com and our Steelers feed. Everything that I write, everything that I produce on our YouTube channel ends up there as well. Whether it comes to articles that I write, analysis that I do film breakdowns that ends up on our YouTube channel as well. All of our podcasts and everything that we do is all there. I'm on social media too. I think I'm at Chris Halicke on just about everything when it comes to either Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. So that's where you can find me. But all my work is on dkpittsburghsports.com.
There we go. And Alan, you know the drill.
Saunders _PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the type account. SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the words so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus, which gets you an ad-free reading experience. All kinds of subscribers only. Perks and benefits, and of course, anyone can like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform. That's free, and it really helps us continue to grow our channel. We're looking to do that always, and we've got a solid number here: 15,980 subscribers. Smitty, I'll let you go first because this is a good number.
So I mentioned Darnell Washington, but we like to stay away from the current players. I am going Cedric Wilson as my number 80.
I'm going Jaheen Arnold.
Whoever that is.
That's a deep cut. That's
what year? What timeline are we talking about there? What era Steelers?
We're talking late 90s, like end of the roster, like wide receiver 6, who hung around for like 5 seasons.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, you got a number 80 for us.
If you can see smoke coming out of my ears, I'm trying to think back to the 90s because I know that there was an obscure one back then. I don't want to just go Plexico Burress because that's just too easy. Shoot, man. I might have to go Plex because you guys have already said Cedric Wilson, and yeah.
I thought of another really obscure wide receiver, Johnny Holton.
Did you wear number 80?
Johnny Holton was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think
for some reason played quite a few snaps in 2009. I think he had the most targets with less than 5 receptions in like NFL history that year. Something insane.
There you go. Text the 90s receiver that wore 80 was Charles Davenport. I've used him before. That's why I didn't.
I was that is actually the guy who I was thinking of. That's funny because I just the name for whatever reason. I'm more of a face guy than a name guy. So I was picturing it, but that doesn't help when it comes to a podcast.
Oh man. All right. Good stuff. Well, Alan told you what to do here on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok. Then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH. Thanks again to Chris Halicke for joining. And for Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.